Welcome to this Deep Dive. It's all about insider threats. Insider threat sounds a little bit like a spy movie, huh?
Yeah.
But we're not talking about fictional double agents. We're going deep into the real security risks.
Yeah.
The ones that can happen inside any organization.
Right.
And you've given me this really interesting mix of articles and YouTube videos. So let's dive in.
Absolutely, yeah. It's fascinating how these sources, reveal the subtle signs that often come before an insider threat incident. They highlight the importance of understanding those indicators and taking proactive steps to protect your organization.
Okay, so let's unpack that. What exactly are insider threat indicators and why are they so important to understand?
So insider threat indicators are basically red flags, subtle cues that might signal that an employee is about to do something that would harm the organization. This could be anything from behavioral changes, like all of a sudden they're trying to bypass security protocols, to data anomalies, like maybe they're downloading huge amounts of sensitive information that they don't normally access.
One of the articles mentioned an employee trying to download a ton of confidential data late at night. That really stuck with me. It seems crazy like something out of a movie, but it just goes to show that these threats are real.
Exactly. And early detection is absolutely key. By recognizing these indicators, organizations can step in before a possible incident becomes a full-blown crisis.
So it's not just about reacting after something bad happens, but being proactive in preventing it in the first place.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's about shifting from a reactive security mindset to a proactive one. Instead of cleaning up the mess after a breach, we're trying to stop it from even happening.
That makes a lot of sense. You've also got me thinking, if we're talking about real people here, not just, robots, doesn't that mean their motivations play a huge role in all of this?
Oh, absolutely. Psychological factors are a huge part of the equation. An employee that might be going through financial stress or experiencing deep dissatisfaction at work, they might be more prone to taking risky actions, even if they'd never even considered it before.
So we're not just looking for technical signs, we're also looking for changes in behavior and understanding the human element behind those changes.
Exactly. Now, it's important to remember that these factors alone aren't like foolproof indicators. Someone might be having a tough time personally, but would never even think about doing anything to harm their company. It's about seeing the whole picture and understanding the context of, the situation.
It's like putting a puzzle together. You need all the pieces to see the full picture.
That's a great way to put it. One of the YouTube videos you shared really dove into this concept of just-in-time permissions, or JIT. It's a great example of a proactive security measure.
Oh yeah, I found that video super interesting. It made me think about how we often give employees access to way more data than they actually need, to do their jobs, which can create unnecessary risk.
That's such a good observation. JIT is all about minimizing that risk. Instead of granting employees access to sensitive information all the time, JIT grants temporary access, only when it's absolutely needed. It's kind of like giving someone a key code.
That makes a lot of sense. It really limits the window of opportunity for somebody to do something malicious, even if they had bad intentions.
Exactly. It's a really powerful way to mitigate insider threats by controlling access to sensitive information.
So JIT permissions are like this added layer of security targeted at reducing the risks associated with insider threats.
Precisely. And it's fascinating, JIT is becoming increasingly popular as organizations recognize the need for more granular and dynamic access control.
Sounds like there's a lot to consider when implementing something like JIT, though. I imagine it requires some careful planning and coordination within an organization.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution, and it requires a really deep understanding of the organization's specific data needs, workflows, and security requirements. But the benefits in terms of reducing insider threat risk can be substantial.
So JIT is a powerful tool, but not a magic bullet.
Exactly. There's no single solution that can just totally eliminate the risk of insider threats. It's about layering different approaches and creating this comprehensive strategy.
Which is why it's so important to understand the whole spectrum of indicators, all the stuff we've been talking about.
Absolutely. And those indicators often extend beyond the individual. Sometimes it's about recognizing anomalies in how data is being accessed or used within the organization, as a whole.
One of the articles talked about something called cloud identity discovery. And I'm not going to lie, I'm not really sure what that entails. It sounds pretty complex.
It does sound a bit futuristic, but really at its core, it's kind of like detective work, but in the digital realm. Imagine being able to scan your organization's cloud environment and uncover any hidden risks related to user access and permissions. That's basically what cloud identity discovery is all about.
So instead of dusting for fingerprints, we're scanning for digital footprints.
That's a great way to put it. It's about looking for unusual patterns of access, unauthorized accounts, or, anything that just doesn't quite add up.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example, like a real-world example of what that might look like?
Sure. Let's say you find an employee who has access to really sensitive cloud resources, but they're completely outside the scope of what their job responsibilities would be. Like, why would a marketing intern need access to the company's financial records? That's a red flag that definitely needs further investigation.
That's a great example. And with so many businesses moving their operations to the cloud these days, this type of vigilance is even more crucial, right?
Absolutely. The cloud offers incredible benefits, in terms of flexibility and scalability, but it also introduces new security challenges. Cloud identity discovery helps organizations stay ahead of those challenges by proactively identifying potential threats.
It's like having a security guard, patrolling the digital perimeter of your business, making sure everything is in order.
Exactly. Now let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about another fascinating concept that came up in the source material: building resilient secrets for disaster recovery. Sounds a little bit like a secret society for cybersecurity experts.
It does.
Yeah.
It does have a bit of a mysterious ring to it, doesn't it? But seriously, what does it actually mean?
It's all about protecting an organization's most valuable assets, its secrets. Passwords, encryption keys, API keys, other sensitive information that's crucial for operations.
So it's about making sure those secrets are safe and sound, even if something catastrophic happens.
Precisely. Imagine a company experiences, a major cyber attack or even a natural disaster. If their critical secrets are compromised or lost, it could be really, really difficult for them to recover and get back on track.
So building resilient secrets is like having a backup plan for your most important data, like hiding a spare key in a safe place just in case you lose the original.
That's exactly it. It's about creating these really robust backup and recovery systems to make sure those secrets are protected, no matter what challenges might come their way.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, another topic that I was really intrigued by was OAuth, OTP, MFA. I have to admit that acronym sounds like a mouthful. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. Okay, so it stands for Open Authentication, Time-Based One-Time Password Multi-Factor Authentication. But it really boils down to this. It's about adding an extra layer of security to your accounts.
So instead of just using a password, which could be stolen or guessed, you also need unique code, maybe from an app on your phone or something.
Exactly. It's like a two-step verification process. Makes it much harder for hackers to get into your accounts, even if they manage to get your password.
It's like having a security guard who checks your ID twice before they let you into a building.
Yeah.
I actually use two-factor authentication for a bunch of my accounts. It is a bit of a hassle, but it gives me a lot more peace of mind.
I totally agree. And the beauty of OAuth, OTP, MFA is that it's pretty easy to set up and use. There are a lot of popular authenticator apps, and many of the videos that you provided walk through that process, step by step.
That's good to know. It sounds like something everyone should be using, not just, organizations.
I couldn't agree more.
Speaking of, valuable insights, one of the YouTube videos you shared featured interviews with actual cybersecurity experts, and they were discussing best practices in the field. It felt like, getting a glimpse behind the curtain.
Oh yeah, that video was really insightful. Hearing from those on the front lines of cybersecurity always provides valuable perspective. They shared some really great tips that can be applied both at the organizational level and, the individual level as well.
They really hammered home the importance of simple things, like regularly updating your software.
Absolutely. It's like getting a flu shot, but for your computer. It helps protect you from the latest threats. They also highlighted the importance of strong, unique passwords for all your accounts and enabling two-factor authentication whenever possible.
And I remember them talking about being extra careful about clicking on links and opening attachments in emails, especially because phishing scams are getting even more sophisticated.
You're so right. It was almost like they were saying, don't take the bait. Phishing scams are designed to trick you into giving up sensitive information. And even experienced users can fall victim to them.
It's crazy how convincing those scams can be. I read about one where a hacker created a fake login page that looked exactly like a popular social media site.
It's like this constant cat and mouse game. Hackers are always coming up with new ways to trick people.
Which is why it's so important to, stay informed about the latest threats. The experts in that video also mentioned the importance of backing up your data regularly. That really hit home for me.
Backing up your data is like having an insurance policy for your digital life. You just never know when you might need it. They recommended backing up locally and to the cloud for extra protection.
Okay, let's switch gears for a second and dive into some of the more technical things that came up in the source material. One that stood out to me was enumerating cloud services. It sounds like it's straight out of a sci-fi novel. Can you help me demystify it?
Sure. Imagine a hacker gains access to a company's network. Well, they might use tools to scan the system and identify all the cloud services that are running, things like Azure Active Directory, Office 365, and others. So basically, they're building a map of the company's cloud infrastructure.
So it's like a burglar casing a house before breaking in. They're gathering information to plan their attack.
That's exactly right. By understanding what cloud services are being used, the hacker can look for vulnerabilities or misconfigurations that they can then exploit.
Just reinforces the idea that security is an ongoing process. It's not a one-time fix. You always got to be a step ahead of the bad guys.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another important concept, privileged access management, or PAM for short.
That sounds like something only IT people would need to worry about.
Not necessarily. PAM is actually relevant to everyone because it's all about protecting the most critical systems and data in an organization. Think of it like having a security system, but for the crown jewels of your business.
So we're talking about those accounts that have the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah.
The ones that could cause the most damage if they fell into the wrong hands.
Exactly. PAM involves implementing really strict controls over these accounts. Things like strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, and limiting the number of people who have access. It's kind of like having a vault, but with multiple locks and security cameras to protect the most valuable assets.
That makes sense. Now, one of the videos you shared focused on password fillers, specifically, within the context of PAM. Can you explain what those are and why they're relevant?
Sure. So password fillers are tools that automatically fill in your usernames and passwords on websites. So they're super convenient, but there's a catch. They can also pose a security risk, because if a hacker gets access to your password filler, they could potentially access all of your accounts.
So it's kind of a trade-off, between convenience and security.
Exactly. The video you shared really emphasized the importance of choosing a reputable password filler, protecting it with a strong master password, and you guessed it, multi-factor authentication.
It's a good reminder that convenience shouldn't come at the expense of security.
I completely agree. Another video you shared delved into identity management, and specifically using this platform called Entra ID. I gotta admit, that one sounded pretty complex to me.
Yeah, it does sound a bit like a spy movie. What's the connection to insider threats, though?
Well, Entra ID is a cloud-based solution. It helps organizations manage and secure access to their applications and data. Think of it like a central control panel for everything related to who has access to what within the organization.
So it's kind of like this digital bouncer, who checks everyone's ID before letting them into the party.
Exactly. And by using a platform like Entra ID, organizations can streamline their identity management processes, enhance security, and reduce the risk of insider threats.
It's like having a digital security system that protects all the doors and windows of your business.
Precisely. Now, another video took kind of a deep dive into a really technical topic, rotating passwords in Red Hat Linux.
Okay, that one definitely went over my head. But I'm guessing it's important even if you're not like a tech expert.
You're right. It highlights this fundamental security principle that applies to everybody, password rotation. So instead of using the same password for years and years, you should be changing it regularly to minimize the risk of unauthorized access.
Like changing the locks on your doors every few months. Makes it a lot harder for burglars to break in.
Exactly. That video provided a step-by-step guide to rotating passwords specifically in Red Hat Linux, but the principle applies to any system or account.
So even if you're not managing a Linux server, the takeaway is to change your passwords regularly.
Absolutely. Another video you shared took a slightly different approach, focusing on the importance of business resilience.
Okay, that one caught my attention. It sounds like something that every organization should be thinking about.
It is. Business resilience is all about an organization's ability to adapt and recover from disruptions, whether that's a cyber attack, a natural disaster, or something else entirely. It's all about being prepared for the unexpected.
So it's kind of like having a backup generator, for your house in case the power goes out. You're prepared for any eventuality.
Exactly. That video highlighted the importance of having a comprehensive business resilience plan. That includes things like disaster recovery, business continuity, and cybersecurity incident response.
It's like having a survival kit, but for your business. You just never know when you might need it.
Exactly. Now, another video focused on this thing called zero trust security. I gotta admit, that sounds kind of paradoxical.
It does sound a little counterintuitive, doesn't it? I mean, shouldn't we be able to trust at least some things in the digital world?
That's a great question. The idea behind zero trust security is that you should never implicitly trust anything or anyone inside or outside the network. It's all about verifying every request and every connection.
So it's kind of like having a security guard who checks everyone's ID, even if they're wearing an employee badge.
Exactly. It's based on the principle of never trust, always verify.
So how do you actually implement something like zero trust security? It sounds pretty intense.
Yeah, it involves implementing multiple layers of security like multi-factor authentication and continuous monitoring.
So it's kind of like having a fortress, but with multiple walls and guard towers. It would be pretty difficult to get through.
Precisely. And it's becoming increasingly popular as organizations realize that traditional security perimeters just aren't enough anymore. You can't just assume anything is safe.
One of the videos that you shared was about shadow admin attacks. And that sounded a little spooky to me. Can you tell me what that means?
Yeah, so shadow admins are individuals who have gained unauthorized administrative access to systems or networks. They operate in the shadows, hence the name, and they can cause a lot of damage.
So it's kind of like having a rogue employee who secretly gave themselves access to all the company's confidential data.
Exactly. And these attacks can be really hard to detect because they often involve legitimate user accounts that have been compromised in some way.
It's like having a thief who secretly made a copy of your house keys.
Yeah.
And can come and go whenever they want. That's kind of a scary thought.
It is. That video really emphasized the importance of strong access controls, regular security audits, and monitoring systems to detect any suspicious activity.
It's a constant battle to stay one step ahead of the bad guys. That's for sure.
Speaking of tools for protection, one of the videos you provided featured the solution called Delinea Secret Server. Have you heard of that one?
It rings a bell, but I'm not sure I fully understand what it does.
Well, Delinea Secret Server is a privileged access management solution. It helps organizations secure and manage their passwords, certificates, and other sensitive information. It's like a digital vault for all of your most important secrets.
So instead of writing passwords down on sticky notes or storing them in spreadsheets, you could store them securely in Delinea Secret Server.
Exactly. It provides a centralized, secure place to store that sensitive information, and it enforces strong access controls. So that way only authorized individuals can get to what they need.
It's like having a bank vault, but for your passwords. A lot safer than keeping them under your mattress.
Exactly. It also offers features like password rotation, session recording, and auditing. It helps organizations meet compliance requirements and protect against insider threats.
It's like having a security guard watching over your secrets 24/7. That's pretty reassuring.
Absolutely. Another video you shared focused on a specific type of cybersecurity training, incident response training.
That sounds a bit like something out of a disaster movie. Is it really that dramatic?
Well, maybe not quite as dramatic as a Hollywood blockbuster, but it is about preparing individuals and teams to effectively handle security incidents.
So it's kind of like having a fire drill, but for cyber attacks. You practice what to do in case of an emergency.
That's a great analogy. Incident response training helps organizations minimize the damage caused by security incidents. It helps them recover more quickly, and it helps them improve their overall security posture.
So it's kind of like having a first aid kit, but for cyber attacks.
You got it. You want to be prepared to treat those wounds and prevent any further damage.
Okay, let's talk about something that sounds a little more aggressive. Penetration testing. One of the videos you sent me went into some detail about it. What exactly is involved?
So penetration testing, or pen testing as it's often called, is like a simulated cyber attack. And it's done to try to find vulnerabilities in an organization's systems and networks.
So it's like hiring ethical hackers to try to break into your systems and see if they can find any weaknesses.
That's exactly right. It's like hiring a security consultant to test the locks on your doors and windows. Make sure they're actually secure.
It seems like a really proactive approach to security. Why wait for something bad to happen when you can find those weak spots in advance?
You're exactly right. Penetration testing can be really valuable for identifying and mitigating security risks before real attackers have a chance to exploit them.
Okay. Another term that I'm not familiar with is Security Information and Event Management, or SIM. It sounds incredibly technical.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful. But think of it this way. SIM is a type of security software that gives you this central hub for collecting, analyzing, and managing security data from across an organization's entire IT infrastructure.
So it's like having a security command center that receives alerts from all the different security systems in your business.
That's a great way to think about it. SIM systems collect logs and events from firewalls, intrusion detection systems, antivirus software, and a lot more.
And then it uses that information to try to identify potential threats.
That's exactly right. It's kind of like having a detective that analyzes all of the evidence, trying to identify who the culprit is.
Okay, that makes more sense. It sounds like a really powerful tool for organizations to have.
It is, especially when it comes to detecting insider threats.
How so?
Well, SIM systems can identify unusual patterns of behavior, like employees accessing sensitive data they wouldn't normally need, or maybe logging in during really odd hours.
It's like having a security camera that records everything that happens in your business, but with the added intelligence to actually analyze the footage and let you know if something's suspicious.
Exactly. Another video you shared talked about the NIST Cybersecurity framework. It sounds really official.
It does sound pretty official. What is that exactly?
The NIST Cybersecurity Framework is a set of guidelines and best practices that were developed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. And it's designed to help organizations manage and reduce their cybersecurity risk. It's like a roadmap for cybersecurity.
So it's kind of like having a set of blueprints for building a secure business.
Exactly. It provides a common language and a structured approach to cybersecurity, so it helps organizations align their security practices with their business goals.
It's like having a recipe for cybersecurity. You follow the steps, and you're more likely to end up with a secure outcome.
Exactly. The NIST Cybersecurity Framework is widely recognized and adopted by organizations of all sizes and across all different industries.
Okay, another term that came up is data loss prevention, or DLP. It sounds like something you'd use to prevent losing your keys or your wallet.
It does sound that way. But in the context of cybersecurity, DLP is a type of security software that helps organizations protect their sensitive data. That could be from unauthorized access, unauthorized use, or unauthorized disclosure. Think of it like a security guard for your data.
So it's like having a lock on your filing cabinet to prevent people from stealing your confidential documents.
That's a great analogy. DLP systems use different techniques to identify and protect sensitive data, things like data classification and content inspection.
It's like having a sniffer dog that can detect sensitive data, even if it's hidden in plain sight.
I love that analogy. DLP systems can be very effective at preventing insider threats.
How so?
Well, they can identify and block attempts to steal sensitive data, like copying it to a USB drive or emailing it to an unauthorized recipient.
It's like having a security camera watching over your data, and it alerts you if anybody tries to steal it.
Exactly. Now, shifting gears a little bit, another important topic that came up in the source material is vulnerability assessments.
Ah, yes, vulnerability assessments. It sounds a little bit like going to the doctor for a checkup.
That's a great way to think about it. A vulnerability assessment is a really systematic review of an organization's systems and networks to identify security weaknesses that could be exploited by attackers.
So it's like hiring a security consultant to walk through your house and point out all the potential security flaws.
You got it. And they can use automated tools to do that, or they can do it manually.
It seems like vulnerability assessments would be a crucial part of any organization's security strategy.
Absolutely. They help organizations identify and mitigate security risks before they can be exploited.
It's like getting a regular checkup for your cybersecurity. It helps you stay healthy and prevent serious problems from developing.
Exactly. Now, shifting gears a little bit, another fundamental concept that emerged from the source material is access control.
Okay, access control. That sounds pretty straightforward. It's all about controlling who has access to what, right?
That's the basic idea, but it's a lot more than just locking doors and setting passwords. It's this whole set of policies, procedures, and technologies that make sure that only authorized people can get to sensitive information and resources.
So it's like having a security guard who checks everyone's ID before letting them into a building, but with a lot more sophistication and granularity.
Exactly. It involves identifying users, authenticating their identities, authorizing their access to specific resources, and monitoring their activity.
So it's like having a digital fingerprint scanner that verifies everyone's identity before granting them access to specific areas of the building.
Exactly. Access control is fundamental to protecting sensitive data and systems.
It's like having a strong foundation for your cybersecurity, the base upon which all other security measures are built.
Absolutely. One of the videos you shared talked about intrusion detection systems, or IDS for short.
Yes, intrusion detection system. It sounds a little bit like something you'd see in a spy movie. What is it exactly?
An IDS is like a security camera that watches over your network. And if it sees someone trying to break in, it sounds an alarm.
So it's like having a guard dog that barks if anyone tries to enter your property without permission.
That's a great way to put it. IDS systems use a variety of techniques to detect intrusions, like signature-based detection and anomaly detection.
It's like having a detective who analyzes network traffic for any signs of criminal activity.
Exactly. They're a really important layer of defense because they can detect and alert you to attacks that you might not otherwise notice.
Okay, this next one sounds a little more familiar. Encryption.
Yes, encryption. It's all about protecting data by converting it into an unreadable format.
So it's like putting your sensitive information in a safe that only you have the key to open.
Exactly. Only someone with the correct decryption key can unscramble the data and make it readable again.
It's like having a secret language that only you and the intended recipient can understand.
I like that analogy. Encryption is essential for protecting sensitive data both in transit and at rest. So both when it's being transmitted over networks and when it's stored on devices.
It's like putting a lock on your data to prevent anyone from stealing it.
Absolutely. Speaking of locks, have you ever heard of firewalls?
Of course. It sounds like something you'd use to protect a building from a fire, but I know it's a cybersecurity term too.
You're right. In cybersecurity, a firewall is like a barrier between your computer or network and the outside world. It controls incoming and outgoing network traffic, and it blocks any unauthorized access attempts.
So it's like having a security guard at the entrance to your network, and they check everyone's ID before letting them in.
That's exactly right. Firewalls use a set of rules to determine which traffic is allowed and which traffic is blocked.
It's like having a bouncer at a nightclub who only lets in people who are on the guest list.
Exactly. Firewalls are essential for protecting your computer or network from unauthorized access and attacks.
It's like having a fence around your property to keep out intruders.
Absolutely. Now let's switch gears a bit. Another important topic that came up in the source material is social engineering.
Yes, social engineering. It sounds a little bit more like something you'd study in a psychology class than a technical hacking term.
That's a great observation. Social engineering is all about using human interaction and deception to trick individuals into revealing sensitive information or doing things that compromise security.
So it's like a con artist who tricks you into giving them your money or your personal information.
Exactly. Social engineering attacks can take a lot of different forms, like phishing emails, pretexting phone calls, baiting schemes, and quid pro quo offers.
It's kind of like a chameleon that can change its appearance to blend in with its surroundings and deceive its prey.
I love that analogy. Social engineering attacks are often really effective because they exploit human psychology and our natural tendency to trust others.
It's a good reminder that security isn't just about technology. It's also about human behavior and awareness. You have to be smart about who and what you trust.
Absolutely. Speaking of trust, you know what else plays a really big role in security? Multi-factor authentication, or MFA.
Yes, we touched on that earlier, but it's worth repeating because it's so important.
Absolutely. MFA is like having 2 locks on your door instead of just one. It makes it a lot harder for attackers to get into your accounts.
It's like having to show both your driver's license and a credit card to prove your identity.
Exactly. It typically involves something you know, like a password, something you have, like a smartphone, or something you are like a fingerprint.
It's like having a combination lock that requires you to enter multiple codes in the correct sequence.
Exactly.
Another topic that came up in the source material was password management. It sounds kind of boring, but I'm guessing it's more important than it seems at first.
You are absolutely right. Password management is the practice of creating strong, unique passwords for all of your accounts and storing them securely so you can easily access them.
So it's like having a safe place to store all of your keys so you don't have to carry them all around with you.
That's a great analogy. It typically involves using a password manager, which is a software application that generates and stores your passwords securely.
It's like having a personal assistant who remembers all your passwords for you and keeps them safe from prying eyes.
Exactly. It helps to prevent password reuse, which we talked about before, and is a major security risk.
Because if you use the same password for multiple accounts and one of those accounts gets hacked, then all of your accounts are at risk.
Exactly. It's like using the same key to lock your house, your car, and your office.
And if someone steals that key, they have access to everything. Yikes.
Exactly.
Another term I noticed in the source material was security awareness training. It sounds a little bit like something you do in school or at work.
That's a great observation. Security awareness training is all about educating employees about cybersecurity threats and best practices to protect themselves and the organization.
So it's like giving people a crash course in cybersecurity so they know how to avoid scams, protect their passwords, and recognize suspicious activity.
Exactly. It typically covers topics like phishing, malware, social engineering, password security, and data protection.
It's like giving people a toolkit for cybersecurity so they can learn the basics and protect themselves and their devices.
Exactly. It's a really important part of any cybersecurity program because it helps to create a culture of security within the organization.
It's like teaching people to be their own security guards.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about something that sounds a little scary. Ransomware.
Yes, ransomware. It's a type of malware that can be incredibly damaging. It's like a digital kidnapper who holds your data hostage.
So it's like someone breaking into your house, stealing all of your valuables, and demanding money to return them.
That's a great analogy. It encrypts your files and then it demands a ransom payment in exchange for the decryption key.
So you can't access your own data unless you pay the ransom. That's terrifying.
It can be really devastating for individuals and organizations.
How do people usually get infected with ransomware?
It's often spread through phishing emails, malicious websites, or software vulnerabilities. The best way to protect yourself is to practice good cybersecurity hygiene, such as keeping your software up to date and being cautious about what you click on.
It's like having a strong immune system so your computer can fight off infections.
That's a great way to put it. Another really important tool for staying healthy in the digital world is antivirus software.
Oh yeah, antivirus software. It sounds pretty familiar. Can you remind us why it's so important?
Of course. Antivirus software is designed to detect and remove malware from your computer. It's like having a security guard who patrols your computer and removes any intruders.
So it's like having a bouncer at a nightclub. You know, they check everyone's ID and toss out anyone who's not supposed to be there.
That's exactly right. Antivirus software typically scans your computer for known malware signatures. It blocks malicious websites, and it monitors for suspicious activity.
It's like having a detective who investigates any suspicious behavior happening on your computer.
Exactly. It's a crucial layer of defense.
Okay, let's talk about one more concept before we wrap up, this part of our deep dive. Phishing.
Ah, yes, phishing. It's a classic social engineering attack. It's still really effective today.
It sounds a little bit like something you do with a fishing rod.
It does. But in cybersecurity, phishing uses these fraudulent emails or websites to try to trick people into revealing sensitive information.
So it's like a con artist who sends you a fake email. It looks like it's from your bank asking you to update your account information.
Exactly. And these emails and websites can look incredibly convincing. They might use logos, branding from legitimate organizations just to try to trick you.
It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. It looks harmless, but it's actually very dangerous.
Exactly.
So how can we protect ourselves from falling victim to these scams?
The best way to protect yourself is to just be skeptical. Don't trust any unsolicited emails or websites that ask for your personal information.
Always double check the sender's address to make sure it's actually legit. And if something seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Exactly. It's all about being aware and using common sense.
It's amazing how convincing those phishing scams can be. They really prey on, our natural tendency to trust, especially when things look official.
That's true, yeah. And that's why awareness is just so crucial. The more you understand about these tactics, the better equipped you are to spot them and, of course, avoid falling victim.
One of the articles you shared mentioned spear phishing. What's the difference between that and, regular phishing?
Spear phishing is more like a targeted attack. Instead of casting a wide net, spear phishing focuses on specific individuals or groups within an organization.
So it's even more insidious because it's personalized.
Exactly. Attackers might use information that they gathered from social media or other sources just to make their emails seem more legitimate. And that increases the chances of it actually working.
So it's kind of like a sniper picking off their targets one by one.
That's a great analogy. And because spear phishing attacks are so targeted, they can be really difficult to detect.
So what can people do to protect themselves from spear phishing?
The same principles really apply. Be skeptical of unsolicited emails. Carefully check the sender's address. And don't click on any links or open any attachments unless you're absolutely sure they're safe.
It's all about being careful and using common sense. Don't give away your personal information unless you're absolutely sure you know you're dealing with a legitimate source.
Exactly. You know, one of the YouTube videos you shared that I thought was really fascinating was about Delinea Secret Server. It sounds like something straight out of a spy movie.
Yeah, it does. It does have a little bit of a James Bond feel to it, doesn't it? What exactly is Delinea Secret Server, and how does it help protect against insider threats?
Well, Delinea Secret Server is a privileged access management solution. So it's like a high-tech vault for all of an organization's most valuable secrets.
So secrets like passwords, encryption keys, and other sensitive data.
Exactly. It provides a secure, centralized place to store this information. And it has these really strict access controls to make sure that only authorized individuals can access the information they need.
So it's like having a bank vault, but for digital secrets.
That's a great way to put it. It's a lot more secure than storing this information on sticky notes or in spreadsheets, which unfortunately a lot of organizations still do.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking how many data breaches happen because of simple human error.
It's true. People often underestimate the importance of good password practices and secure storage.
So Delinea Secret Server helps eliminate that risk by providing a really secure platform for managing sensitive information.
Exactly. And it also provides additional features like password rotation, session recording, just to enhance security even further and help meet compliance requirements.
It's like having a security guard, watching over your secrets 24/7.
You got it. Now, another video you shared that I found really fascinating was about incident response training. Have you ever participated in any kind of security training like that?
I haven't, but it sounds really valuable. It's like having a fire drill for cyber attacks, right?
Exactly. Incident response training prepares individuals and teams to effectively handle security incidents, like data breaches or ransomware attacks.
So instead of panicking and not knowing what to do, everyone has a plan and everyone knows their role.
Precisely. It helps minimize the damage caused by an incident, it speeds up recovery time, and improves the organization's overall security posture.
So it's like having a first aid kit, but for cyber attacks. You're ready to treat those wounds and prevent further damage.
That's a great way to put it. I also wanted to ask you about another topic that came up in the source material: penetration testing.
Oh yes, penetration testing. It sounds a little bit aggressive, doesn't it?
It does, but it's a very effective way to identify vulnerabilities in an organization's systems and networks. It's like a controlled experiment where ethical hackers try to break into your systems to see if they can find any weaknesses.
So it's like hiring a professional burglar to test your home security system.
That's a great analogy. Penetration testing helps organizations to find and fix security holes before real attackers have the chance to exploit them.
It seems like a really proactive and sensible approach to security. Why wait for something bad to happen when you can identify and fix those problems in advance?
Exactly. It's all about staying ahead of the curve and being prepared.
Speaking of staying ahead of the curve, one of the videos you shared mentioned this thing called Security Information and Event Management, or SIM. What exactly is that?
So SIM is a type of security software that acts like a central nervous system for an organization's cybersecurity. Think of it like a command center that collects and analyzes security data from various sources across their entire IT infrastructure.
So it's like having a team of security analysts constantly monitoring your systems for any signs of trouble.
That's a great way to put it. SIM systems can detect patterns and anomalies that might point to a security threat, like maybe unusual login activity or attempts to access sensitive data.
It's like having a detective, piecing together clues from different sources to solve a crime.
Exactly. SIM systems are a really powerful tool for detecting and responding to security threats, including those from insiders.
Another topic that came up in the videos was this NIST cybersecurity framework. What is that exactly, and why is it important?
The NIST cybersecurity framework is a set of guidelines and best practices developed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's often called NIST for short, and it's designed to help organizations manage and reduce their cybersecurity risk. It's a pretty widely recognized and adopted framework, and it provides like a roadmap for building a secure and resilient organization.
So it's kind of like a blueprint for building a secure business.
Exactly. It provides a common language and a structured approach to cybersecurity, which helps organizations align their security practices with their business objectives.
It's like having a recipe for cybersecurity. You follow the steps and you're more likely to end up with a secure outcome.
Precisely. The NIST cybersecurity framework is a valuable resource for organizations of all sizes and in all industries.
You know, another term that I've heard before, but I never really fully understood is data loss prevention, or DLP. What exactly is that, and how does it relate to, these insider threats?
So DLP is a type of security software. It focuses specifically on protecting sensitive data from unauthorized access, use, or disclosure. Think of it like a security guard, but for your data.
So it's like having a lock on your filing cabinet, to prevent people from stealing your confidential documents.
That's a great analogy. DLP systems use a variety of techniques to identify and protect sensitive data. Things like data classification, content inspection, and policy enforcement.
So it's like having a sniffer dog that can detect sensitive data even if it's hidden in plain sight.
That's a great way to put it. DLP systems can be really effective at preventing insider threats because they can identify and block attempts to exfiltrate sensitive data, like maybe copying it to a USB drive or emailing it to an unauthorized recipient.
It's like having a security camera watching over your data, and it alerts you if anyone tries to steal it.
Exactly. Now, let's shift gears a bit. Another important topic that came up in the source material is vulnerability assessments.
Yeah, vulnerability assessments. It sounds a little bit like, going to the doctor for a checkup. Is that a fair comparison?
Absolutely. A vulnerability assessment is a systematic review of an organization's systems and networks to identify security weaknesses that could be exploited by attackers.
So it's like hiring a security consultant to walk through your house and point out any potential security flaws.
That's a great analogy. Vulnerability assessments can be done with automated tools or manually by security professionals. And they typically involve scanning systems for known vulnerabilities, reviewing configurations, and testing security controls.
So it's like having a detective come to your house and look around for any signs of weaknesses that a burglar could exploit.
Exactly. Vulnerability assessments are a really important part of any cybersecurity program because they help organizations identify and mitigate security risks before attackers can exploit them.
It's like getting a regular checkup, but for your cybersecurity. It helps you stay healthy and prevent serious problems from developing.
Precisely. Another fundamental security principle that emerged from the source material is access control.
Okay, access control. That sounds pretty straightforward. I mean, it's all about controlling, who has access to what, right?
Yeah, that's the basic idea. But it's a lot more complex than just locking doors and setting passwords.
Yeah.
Access control involves a few things: identifying users, authenticating their identities, authorizing their access to specific resources, and monitoring their activity. So it's a whole set of policies, procedures, and technologies.
So it's like having a security guard who checks everyone's ID before letting them into a building, but with a lot more sophistication and granularity.
Exactly. Access control is really essential for protecting sensitive data and systems from unauthorized access.
It's like having a strong foundation for your cybersecurity. It's the base upon which all other security measures are built.
Exactly. One of the videos you shared talked about intrusion detection systems, or IDS for short.
Yes, intrusion detection systems. It sounds kind of like something out of a spy movie. What are they exactly?
An IDS is like a watchdog for your network. It constantly monitors network traffic for any suspicious activity and then alerts security personnel if any potential threats are detected.
So it's like having a guard dog, that barks if anyone tries to enter your property without permission.
That's a perfect analogy. IDS systems use a variety of different techniques to detect intrusions, like signature-based detection, anomaly detection, and behavioral analysis.
It's like having a detective who analyzes all the network traffic for any signs of criminal activity.
Exactly. IDS systems are a valuable layer of defense in any cybersecurity program.
They can detect and alert you to attacks that might otherwise go unnoticed.
Precisely. Another topic that often comes up when you talk about cybersecurity is encryption.
Yes, encryption. I know it's important, but I'm not really sure I understand how it works.
So at its core, encryption is the process of transforming data into an unreadable format. That's to protect it from unauthorized access.
So it's like putting your sensitive information into a safe that only you have the key to open.
That's a great analogy. Encryption uses these complex mathematical algorithms to scramble the data, and only someone with the correct decryption key can unscramble it and make it readable again.
It's like having a secret language that only you and the intended recipient can understand.
Exactly. Encryption is a fundamental security measure for protecting sensitive data, both in transit and at rest, so when it's being transmitted over networks and when it's stored on devices or servers.
So it's like having a lock on your data to prevent anyone from stealing it.
Precisely. Another important cybersecurity concept is firewalls. Have you ever heard of those?
Oh, of course. Yeah. It sounds like something you'd use to protect a building from a fire, but I know it has a different meaning in the context of, cybersecurity.
You're right. In cybersecurity, a firewall acts as a barrier between your computer or your network and the outside world. It controls all the incoming and outgoing network traffic, and it blocks any unauthorized access attempts.
So it's like having a security guard at the entrance to your network. And they check everyone's ID before letting them in.
That's a great analogy. Firewalls use a set of rules to determine which traffic is allowed and which traffic is blocked. They can be configured to block specific IP addresses, ports, or protocols.
It's like having a bouncer at a nightclub who only lets in people who are on the guest list.
Precisely. Firewalls are an essential security measure for protecting your computer or your network from unauthorized access and attacks.
It's like having a fence around your property, to keep out intruders.
Absolutely. Another topic that often comes up when we talk about cybersecurity is social engineering. Have you ever heard of that term?
Yes, social engineering. And it was more like something you'd study in a psychology class than a technical hacking term.
You're right. Social engineering is all about exploiting human psychology and our natural tendency to trust others, and then tricking people into revealing sensitive information or taking actions that compromise security.
So it's like a con artist who tricks you into giving them your money or your personal information.
Exactly. Social engineering attacks can take many different forms. Things like phishing emails, pretexting phone calls, baiting schemes, and quid pro quo offers.
It's like a chameleon. It changes its appearance to blend in with its surroundings and deceive its prey.
I like that analogy. Social engineering attacks are often very effective because they prey on our human weaknesses.
It's a reminder that security isn't just about technology. It's about human behavior and awareness as well.
Absolutely. And speaking of being aware, another topic that came up in the source material is multi-factor authentication, or MFA. You heard of that?
Yes, MFA. We've talked about it briefly, but it's definitely worth repeating, because it's so important.
You're right. MFA is a security measure that requires you to provide 2 or more forms of authentication before you can access an account or system.
So it's like having 2 locks on your door instead of just one. Makes it much harder for attackers to get in.
That's a great way to think about it. MFA typically involves something you know, like a password, something you have, like a smartphone, or something you are, like a fingerprint.
It's like having a combination lock, the kind that requires you to enter multiple codes in the correct sequence.
Precisely. MFA is a really powerful security measure that everyone should be using whenever possible.
Speaking of things everyone should be doing, one of the videos you shared talked about password management. It doesn't sound very exciting, but I have a feeling it's more important than it seems.
You're absolutely right. Password management is all about creating strong, unique passwords for all of your accounts, and then storing them securely.
So it's like having a safe place to store all of your keys. That way you don't have to carry them all around with you.
That's a great analogy. It usually involves using a password manager, which is a software application that generates and stores your passwords securely.
It's like having a personal assistant who remembers all of your passwords for you and keeps them safe from prying eyes.
Exactly. Password managers usually include features like password auditing and breach monitoring, just to further enhance security.
It's like having a security guard watching over your passwords 24/7.
Exactly. Password management is an essential security practice because it helps to prevent password reuse, which, as we discussed earlier, is a major security risk.
Because if you use the same password for multiple accounts and one of those accounts gets compromised, then all of your accounts are at risk, right?
That's right. It's like using the same key to lock your house, your car, and your office.
If someone steals that key, they have access to everything. Yikes.
Exactly. Password management helps to mitigate that risk.
Okay, another term that came up in the source material is security awareness training. Sounds a little bit like something you do, in school or at work.
You're right. Security awareness training is designed to educate employees about cybersecurity threats and best practices. It's like giving them a crash course in cybersecurity.
So it's like giving people a toolkit for cybersecurity, so they know how to avoid scams, protect their passwords, and recognize any suspicious activity.
Exactly. Security awareness training typically covers things like phishing, malware, social engineering, password security, and data protection.
It's like giving people a crash course in being their own security guard, in the digital world.
That's a great way to put it. Now, shifting gears a bit, one of the videos you shared discussed ransomware, which is a type of malware that can be incredibly damaging.
Yes, ransomware. It sounds like something straight out of a horror movie.
It can be pretty scary. Ransomware is a type of malware that encrypts your files, and then it demands a ransom payment in exchange for the decryption key.
So it's like someone breaking into your house, stealing all of your valuables, and demanding money to return them.
That's a great analogy. Ransomware attacks can be devastating for both individuals and organizations.
How do people usually get infected with ransomware?
It's often spread through phishing emails, malicious websites, or software vulnerabilities. The best way to protect yourself is to practice good cybersecurity hygiene. Like keeping your software up to date, being cautious about the emails you open and the links you click, and backing up your data regularly.
So it's like having a strong immune system
Yeah,
for your computer so that it can fight off infections.
that's a great way to think about it. And speaking of keeping your computer healthy, another important tool to have in your cybersecurity arsenal is antivirus software.
Ah, yes, antivirus software. It's something I've always used, but I'm not sure I really know how it works.
Antivirus software is designed to detect and remove malware from your computer. It's like having a security guard who patrols your computer and removes any intruders.
So it's like having a bouncer at a nightclub. They check everyone's ID and toss out anyone who's not supposed to be there.
Exactly. Antivirus software typically scans your computer for known malware signatures. It blocks malicious websites, and it monitors for suspicious activity.
It's like having a detective investigate any suspicious behavior on your computer.
Exactly. Antivirus software is a crucial layer of defense.
Okay, before we wrap up this part of our, deep dive, I wanted to ask you about phishing, which is another term that came up in the source material.
Phishing. It's a classic social engineering attack, but it's still very effective today. It's like a fisherman who uses bait to try to lure fish into a trap.
So it's like a con artist who sends you a fake email that looks like it's from your bank, asking you to update your account information.
Exactly. Phishing emails and websites can look very convincing. They may even use logos and branding from legitimate organizations just to try to make them look more authentic.
It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
It looks harmless, but it's actually very dangerous.
That's a great way to put it.
So, what are some tips for avoiding phishing scams?
The best way to protect yourself from phishing attacks is to be skeptical. Don't trust unsolicited emails or websites that ask for your personal information.
Always double check the sender's address to make sure it's actually legitimate. And if something seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Exactly. It's all about being aware and using common sense.
As we've been discussing all these different cybersecurity concepts, I've realized just how complex this landscape really is.
That's true. Cybersecurity is constantly evolving, and it can feel really overwhelming sometimes.
But it's also incredibly important, especially, in today's digital world.
It really is. We all need to be aware of the risks and take steps to protect ourselves and the organizations we work with.
What are some key takeaways you think our listeners should remember from this conversation?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's important to remember that security is everyone's responsibility. It's not just the job of, the IT professionals or the cybersecurity experts. We all have a role to play.
That's a great point. We can't just assume someone else is taking care of security for us. We need to be proactive and take ownership of our own digital safety.
Exactly. Another important takeaway is that there's no silver bullet when it comes to cybersecurity. There's no single tool or solution that can completely eliminate risk.
So it's about taking a layered approach.
Precisely. It's about combining different security measures like strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, firewalls, intrusion detection systems, security awareness training. You really need to create a comprehensive defense.
It's about staying informed, too, and up to date on the latest threats and vulnerabilities. The cybersecurity landscape is always changing, so we need to be adaptable and vigilant.
Absolutely. The more you know about cybersecurity, the better equipped you'll be to protect yourself and your organization.
Another important takeaway for me has been the realization that cybersecurity is about a lot more than just technology. It's also about people and processes.
That's a really crucial point. Even the most sophisticated technology can be useless if people don't use it properly, or if there are weaknesses in an organization's security processes.
So it's about having the right tools in place, but also about using those tools effectively and having strong security policies and procedures as well.
Exactly. It's about having a holistic approach to cybersecurity.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up this part of our conversation?
I think the most important thing to remember is that cybersecurity is a journey, not a destination. It's something that we need to be thinking about and working on all the time.
That's a great point. We can't just, check a box and assume we're secure.
Yeah.
We need to be constantly learning, adapting, and improving our security posture.
Exactly. The threat landscape is constantly evolving, so we need to be prepared to evolve with it.
Well said. I'm sure our listeners are feeling a lot more informed about the world of insider threats and cybersecurity in general. What are some things they can do to put, all this knowledge into action?
Well, first and foremost, I would encourage them to be proactive. Don't wait until something bad happens to start thinking about cybersecurity. Take steps to protect yourself and your organization now.
That's great advice. Don't wait for a crisis to happen before you take action. It's a lot easier to prevent a problem than it is to fix it after the fact.
Exactly. Another important thing they can do is to stay informed. The more you know about cybersecurity, the better equipped you'll be to protect yourself.
Read articles, watch videos, listen to podcasts. There are so many resources available.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask for help. If you're not sure about something, reach out to a security professional or your IT department.
That's a great reminder. There's no shame in asking for help, especially when it comes to something as important as cybersecurity.
Absolutely. We all need to work together to stay safe in the digital world.
Well said. I think it's time to wrap up this part of our deep dive. But before we do, I want to thank you for sharing your expertise with us. It's been really insightful.
It's been my pleasure. I always enjoy talking about cybersecurity, especially with someone as curious and engaged as you.
I'm always eager to learn more. Okay, stay tuned, listeners, because we'll be back soon with the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore some even more intriguing aspects of insider threats and what you can do to protect yourself and your organization. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of insider threats. We've covered a lot of ground so far, from the subtle signs of trouble to proactive security measures, but now it's time to, bring it all together.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, the idea of bringing it all together, because one of the key takeaways for me from all these sources is that it's not just about the technology.
That's so true. We've talked about all these, fancy tools and software, but in the end, it's people making those decisions, the good ones and the bad ones.
Exactly. What I think is so fascinating is that even with the most advanced security systems in place, a single careless click or a lapse in judgment, it can open the door to a major security breach.
It's almost like cybersecurity is a team sport. You've got technology playing defense, and then human awareness is on offense.
I love that analogy. And just like in any team sport, communication is key. Organizations need to create this environment where employees feel like they can speak up, if they see something suspicious, without being afraid of getting in trouble.
It's about creating that culture of trust and, shared responsibility for security. Everyone needs to be on the same page, working together to protect the organization from threats, both inside and outside.
Absolutely. And, that brings us to a really crucial point for all of our listeners. It's not just about protecting those organizations, it's about protecting ourselves as individuals as well.
So this isn't just for, the IT professionals and the cybersecurity experts. This applies to everyone who uses a computer or a smartphone.
Absolutely. Think about it. We all have personal information stored online. We all use social media. We bank online. So that means that we're all potential targets for cyber attacks. And that includes attacks that could come from insiders who might misuse our trust.
So what does all this mean, for our listeners? What can they do to protect themselves now that they know about this world of insider threats?
Okay, well, first and foremost, be aware. Be mindful of the information you share online. Be cautious about the links that you click. Be suspicious of any emails or messages asking for personal information, especially if you weren't expecting them.
It's kind of like, being street smart, but in the digital world.
Exactly. And just like you wouldn't give your wallet to a stranger on the street, you shouldn't give away your personal information online. unless you're absolutely sure you can trust the source.
That makes sense. Okay, so what else can our listeners do to stay safe?
Practice good password hygiene. Use strong, unique passwords for all your accounts. And think about using a password manager to keep track of all of them securely.
And don't forget about two-factor authentication. Enable it whenever you can. It adds that extra layer of protection to all your accounts.
You're absolutely right. Another crucial tip is to stay informed. Keep up to date on the latest cybersecurity threats and the best practices for protecting yourself. There are a ton of resources available online, articles, blogs, videos. It's like getting a cybersecurity checkup every now and then.
So be aware. Practice good password hygiene. Stay informed. What if our listeners actually see something suspicious? What should they do?
If you see something, say something. If you notice any suspicious activity, whether it's at work or even in your personal life, report it to the appropriate authorities. You could be preventing a major security breach.
It's like being a good digital citizen, We all have a responsibility to keep ourselves and each other safe online.
Well said. As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm really struck by just how much we've learned from the sources that you provided. They've given us such a comprehensive look at these insider threats, from the technical details to that human element.
I agree. It's really been an eye-opener for me. Hopefully, our listeners are leaving this deep dive feeling more informed and more empowered, to navigate this complex world of insider threats.
I hope so too. And as a final thought to leave you with, I would encourage everyone listening to think about this. What subtle changes in your workplace, or even in your own personal online activity, might be worth a second look now that you know what to look for?
That's such a great question. It reminds us that awareness is the first line of defense, and knowledge is power. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and stay safe out there.